Copy, Hog 01. Once more.
Yeah, we see you safe. I see you safe. Bring it in.
Night Owl, Hog 01. Friendlies in sight, target in sight, in from the south.
In from the south, you're cleared hot, cleared hot. Both Hog elements, good guns, good guns.
My childhood, the biggest thing that I had to overcome was the fact that my father was schizophrenic, and so that was tough. He was abusive toward my mother, and I just felt like I could have totally gone the wrong way for sure. But what kept me in line was probably the friends that I had, the church that I was a part of, and my mother's faith.
Welcome to the Pathway to Wings podcast, a podcast for those looking to become Air Force aviators, and hosted by current Air Force aviators. For today's episode, I'll be your host. My name is Major John Waters, call sign Rain. My guest for today's podcast is Major Jay Park, call sign Spins, who is a weapon system operator, or WSO, as we call it, on the F-15E Strike Eagle. He immigrated from Korea at a young age, having to learn English. He had a few hurdles to overcome on his journey and his path becoming an Air Force officer, which I think you're really going to enjoy listening to. So with that being said, let's get into the podcast with Major Jay Spins Park. Spins, before we get rolling into the podcast, will you tell me a little bit about who you are, where you came from, and what you're doing today?
Yeah, so glad to be here. Thanks for having me. My name is Jay Park, and I go by call sign Spins, as he stated too. I'm a Strike Eagle WSO by trade, weapon systems officer, a backseater in the F-15E. I went through the program when I joined the Air Force in 2006, and I decided that I wanted to fly. And for me at the time, the best way for me to do that was to be a navigator. I knew nothing about the program, but I went down to Pensacola and ended up selecting F-15s. And I could have been a bomber WSO as well, but I wanted something fast and be able to see outside my window and fly upside down from time to time. So I went through that pipeline, graduated, went to England at RAF Lakenheath, where I deployed a couple of times, once to Bagram in Afghanistan and once to Djibouti, Africa. After that, my assignment, I ended up coming to Texas, where I flew T-38s and taught at IFF. IFF is a fighter fundamentals course that all pilots and WSOs have to accomplish before they go to fly an actual fighter. And so I taught there for 4 years. Then I went to Korea, where I was a master air attack planner. And I did that for 2 years. And then I went to Pensacola, where I started my training for the Air Force. And I taught the next generation of WSOs as well. I got to do that for 2 years. And then I got directly hired on here for AFRS Det 1 to be the DO here. And so I'm excited to be here and excited to recruit the next generation of aviators and hopefully be diverse and inclusive as well.
Awesome. Yeah. So AFRS, for those who don't know, Air Force Recruiting Service, and then Director of Operations. So the number 2 guy over at Detachment 1, doing a lot of good work. There's a lot to break down and to dig out here, but I like to start kind of the beginning of where Spins got his start. Where did you grow up? What did your childhood look like? And, what was the first step to becoming an Air Force officer for you?
Yeah. Again, Korean American, an immigrant story that has always been with me, that I carry proudly as well. I was born in South Korea, in Masan, which is a suburb city 30 minutes outside of Busan. And Busan, South Korea is the second largest city to Seoul. But anyways, grew up relatively poor, but our family had relatives in America that helped us immigrate. And when I was 8 years old, my dad, my mom, my older brother, and we immigrated to Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, of all places. 8 years old, went to school. We actually immigrated in the summer and then started school right away. not knowing a single English word, went to school. And in order for us to learn the language, the school system had a tutor, but also every day, my brother and I would go to first grade of the elementary school system and learn to read with the other kids that were also learning. So that was a unique situation that we went through. But it took about a year for my brother and I to get comfortable. Wow. But also being Asian American, we were aided by other families in the neighborhood who also had two boys. And so we kind of fit right in and became like a little group of Sandlot kids that look Korean American in the middle of Oklahoma. Got into lots of trouble for sure. But my childhood, the biggest thing that I had to overcome was the fact that my father was schizophrenic. And so that was tough. He was abusive toward my mother. And, I just felt like I could have totally gone the wrong way for sure. But what kept me in line was probably the friends that I had, the church that I was a part of, and my mother's, and continuing to tell us that we could be somebody and we could do some things, and that she was basically the cornerstone for our family. So I didn't want to let her down. And so I just tried to do my best to please her. And eventually that got me on the path to going to college and getting a ROTC scholarship. But interestingly enough, when I was in high school, because we weren't so well-to-do, I almost enlisted in the Army. And thankfully, I had a friend whose father looked at me like I was crazy and said, "Don't chase the money now, like go to school, graduate. While it's tough now, it'll be worth it in the long run if you would just get your degree and then join the military as an officer."
Talk about a glove save there, right?
Oh yeah, huge.
Huge. Your childhood and mine are vastly different, and the hurdles you had to overcome, I would say, are far greater than anything I had to overcome. From just the start of going from Korea to Oklahoma, obviously a very big culture shock there, but the language barrier in itself, I know they say it's easier to learn a language as you're young, but was there anything really significantly challenging about learning the English language and like staying, on path, on track with all the other kids?
Yeah, so I think education system, obviously it's well known that Korea has a very great education system. And so what was easy for me was math, and they'll tell you that all the time, but I was probably doing like fifth grade math as a second grader when I was in Korea. So when I came to the States, like math was just easy for me. So it was nothing that I really had to be concerned about. But I got to be quite honest. I don't know how I learned it. I just know that I remember going to see a tutor. I remember going to first grade to learn with the other kids. But just fast forward a year or two and I was able to communicate. Now, I will say just language in general isn't my strong suit to begin with. So I was never good at reading. I was never good at literature. I was not good at comprehension. My vocab was bad. Like English, anything that's English related, going through college, or high school, you name it, like writing papers, it was all a struggle for me. And still to this day, I will tell you, like, I hate to read, I hate to write papers. So I'm not quite sure how I've made it so far, but that has always been a challenge for me, and it still is.
That is pretty incredible. And I don't want to gloss over either the fact that obviously the home life you were raised in was a challenge too. You did allude to the fact that your mom was kind of like the big, and not letting your mom down was the big like pushing factor for you to succeed, because while it might be cliche, like you said, it can be very easy for you to fall into doing the wrong things or going down the wrong path. So do you think it really was just having a really strong like mom and not wanting to let her down that drove you to success, or was there something else there?
Yeah, so I think all of it, right? To me, a big philosophy in life is it's not about me. It's not about one individual. It's a collective. So there are so many people that I could probably recount that have helped me and shaped me to become the person that I am. But yeah, if I had to single out, one thing, I would say it would be my faith, and my faith that was brought on by my mother, who her faith in God was so strong that she kept our family together. So, as I had mentioned, my father was abusive. He was schizophrenic, but he was abusive on top of that. And so my mom had to not only work 2 jobs to raise 2 boys, and she was a college graduate in Korea, so well educated, but coming to a new country, she had to humble herself, and we were cleaning. So we were janitors. I remember like coming home from school and then getting into the car and then driving to these large buildings and cleaning offices for 3, 4, 5 hours. And that was regular life for me. So I didn't really have time to do homework or sometimes go out and play because we had to support my mom. That was my childhood, and just seeing her work several jobs, on top of that getting abused by my father, and still for her to keep our family together, she could have left. She said she had countless of times where she came home and she was ready to leave. So she could have left us, she could have left him, but for her to say to me when I was 12 years old, hey, this is a burden for our family to carry. I will not leave you, and I will stay with this family because I'm not leaving. And so that level of commitment and her faith in God to believe that that was something that a burden for us to carry, it's just something that I can't witness and think my life is hard. I looked at her life and I thought, well, I have nothing to complain about. The things that I'm dealing with is probably trivial when I have to compare it to the life that she's living. And so, yeah, for me, that's a hands down, like I wanted to be not an additional burden to her.
Yeah, that's huge. In the fact that, an incredibly mature view to take on life at that point in your life, as well as given the circumstances you were dealing with. So hats off to you. I know there are a lot of other people that go through and like struggle with things. There are always gonna be hurdles and there are always gonna be roadblocks, and you got to push through it. But for me, that definitely resonates as a really challenging upbringing and a success story of coming out of something that could have turned and taken you down a completely different path. So kind of lends to getting to the next phase of life, which is going into college and then eventually into the Air Force. What were some of the steps you took to get into ROTC? Was it just kind of happenstance, or what did it look like for you?
Having grown up in Oklahoma as an Asian American, again, there's not a lot of us. And as a kid, I couldn't wait to leave. I was just waiting and waiting. I put some, applications out there in college. And again, I wasn't the best student. I'll just be flat out honest. But thankfully, I wasn't. I put some effort into it when I was in high school, my last couple of years, to make sure that I could at least go to college. But bottom line is, again, we just didn't have a lot of money. And so if I stayed in Oklahoma, I could have gotten the grants and I could have gotten the scholarship. And Oklahoma in-state tuition was like, back then, it was only like a couple $1,000s a semester. And I actually commuted for the first couple of years as well, so that I can save some money and help continue to support my mom. And at the time, though, as a freshman, I realized that, helping support my mom and still trying to get things paid for, I could have used extra money. And so I ended up going through an engineering degree because, again, I was decent at math. And so I ended up choosing aerospace engineering. I don't know what made me do it. I think I had this idea that like aerospace engineering meant like I could potentially go to space one day. I wanted to go to space. I'm really interested about the stars and just, it's just fascinating to me. And so I got into that program, and then I quickly realized like, this is not going to get me into space. And so then I looked around, and thankfully there were 3 other cadets that were in class with me. And I kind of ended up talking to them, and they're like, you should really just look at, ROTCs. And so, again, by God's good grace, like I went to the Army first. I'm like, hey, you guys have an ROTC program? Like, can I, apply? And they're like, nope, I don't have time for you. I went to the Navy. They said the same thing. I don't have time for you. Then I went to the Marine Corps. They're like, nope, sorry. And so then I ended up circling back around, going to the Air Force. Because again, in my mind, I had this thought like Air Force isn't really military. You just fly jets, right? Like it was just a total naive thing that I didn't fully understand. And so when I went to the Air Force, they're like, you have an aerospace engineering degree, or that's what you're pursuing. Hey, come audit our classes. And if you're up for it and you have the grades, then we'll offer you a scholarship. And so, yeah, my entire sophomore year, I audited Air Force ROTC program. And then in my third year, I got a scholarship. And then I ended up finishing out my program. That's how I ended up paying for college and going to the Air Force route.
Nice. And that landed you down in Pensacola at the conclusion of graduating and commissioning as a second lieutenant. And you're going through navigator training, right? Can you talk to me a little bit about navigator training? Because again, it was WSOs and then CISOs and lots of different paths there.
Oh, yeah. So all really confusing. So when I was in ROTC, they, did a good job of, convincing me that I needed to fly. And so I did that. But because of my vision requirements, and I wasn't very good at playing video games either, so I just figured out I wouldn't be a good pilot. So that was like the next best thing is go be a navigator. I'm like, great. I still get to fly. I still get to drop bombs, shoot missiles. Like that sounds fun. But again, no one in my program knew anything about this WSO program. And at the time, and when I went through, there were navigators, panel navs, and then there were WSOs. So if you wanted to fly the B-1, the B-52, or the F-15, you had to go to Pensacola. And if you wanted to be in the back seat for a lot of the other platforms, like the bigger platforms, you had to go to Randolph in Texas. So I strictly picked Pensacola. Like I said, I was itching to leave the state. I wanted to go to Florida. And I thought, when I arrived in Pensacola, I didn't realize that I ended up in South Alabama as opposed to Florida. So that was a big mistake on my part, assuming Pensacola was Florida. But technically it is, but culturally it really isn't. Yeah. But anyway, so I show up there, and what I want to share about the CISO, what it's called now, what we used to be, are navigators with these wings, but we're now called CISOs, Combat System Officers. So that is the big title that everyone gets as a rating when you finish the program. But underneath that, there are 4 different names. So WSO, Weapon Systems Officer, which is a subset. And then you have an EWO, EWO, Electronic Warfare Officer. You also have a NAV, which is a traditional navigator on some of the other platforms. And then you have the SOs, or sensor operators, that fly on Spec Ops or special warfare aircraft. And so from that, you can track into different lanes, 4 different lanes, and continue to get your wings.
Yeah, obviously there's a lot that goes into that. And then you track the WSO route, the weapon system operator, putting you into the pointy end of the spectrum as far as flying fast, flying upside down, and dropping bombs. Can you tell me a little bit about your career flying in the Strike Eagle and what that was like in some of those deployments?
Yeah. So once I tracked WSOs, again, like I said from my intro, like I just wanted to be able to fly fast and look outside and shoot missiles and drop bombs. And really, it just seemed like an interesting, fun, exciting thing to do. And so eventually I went through the program, went through IFF, went through the B course at Seymour. And along that route, I met my lovely wife and I got married. And one of the things that we decided was, hey, we kind of want to travel the world. And again, I was itching to leave Oklahoma. So I was like, hey, I want to get as far away as I can. And we ended up being able to go to RAF Lakenheath, which is in England. And from there, I got to just be straight up honest. I wasn't part of a fraternity. And so I didn't realize what it was to be kind of in a fighter squadron, just this tight knit brotherhood, a sisterhood, a camaraderie of, aviators. I ended up doing okay, went on my first deployment to Afghanistan. And man, just a interesting time for sure. We went in the middle of the summer, so it was very hot. But thankfully, Bagram is 5,000 feet MSL, and so it was man. I don't know, just so much to describe, so much that I got to do and witness, and throughout that deployment, I launched on alert. I got to drop bombs within like 10 minutes after getting the call. I've supported, special ops guys on the ground. One thing that really sticks out in my mind about deploying in Afghanistan is just, every time we walk out the door, we would slap this label that said, it's for the 18-year-old Marine on the ground. And so that was just always something that stood out to me is, I was flying and you could get, philosophical about, if we should have been there, if we shouldn't have been there. If we're doing what we were supposed to do or what the right answer was. But at the end of the day, we knew that we had friendlies and U.S. Marines and our Army soldiers on the ground that are trying to do the mission that they were told to execute. And we had to go out there and, have their backs. So that's the big takeaway I have from my deployments as a Strike Eagle WSO.
Yeah, so no doubt there's a lot in there that I think is pertinent to this conversation and really ties back to, I think you and I are similar. It's that 18-year-old Marine on the ground who you're looking to support. And what that does, it's tied to a mission. And every platform has a different mission and it has a different piece to the puzzle, and everyone has to play in the right spot at the right time to make everything happen, whether it's being, hauling cargo across the world so the munitions are there or the supplies are there, to the tankers are providing gas and they're airborne at the right time so that the pointy end guys can get gas and go drop bombs. But yeah, that's what I get a lot of questions about. Hey, like I want to go fly this plane or that plane. And we kind of gloss over it like tongue in cheek, like, hey, we don't fly fast, we don't fly upside down. But I think it really comes down as to like the mission and what the mission we're doing and what that, says about you and what your interest is and what you're passionate about. 9/11 was a big catalyst for me in joining the military. So going out there and getting back at the guys who, took down the towers and struck the Pentagon and killed all those innocent people was a big factor for me. So my question would be to you is, what do you think, as a young person who is looking to pursue a career in the military, specifically looking to pursue a career into aviation, how do they go about deciding on like, hey, what plane do I want to go fly?
Oh, man. Yeah. So again, today's 9/11. So it's like literally a perfect segue into why we joined. And, for me, like I said, honestly, I joined because it was something that I needed some stability in my life and a paycheck. But again, having supported the 18-year-olds on the ground and having experienced that, it's just something that I wouldn't trade for anything. But I instructed as well a couple of years down at Pensacola where these students were trying to decide, hey, what should I do? What platform should I get into? And for me, it's just your personality and your whys. We all have our whys as to everything, all the decisions and the choices that we make. And so no matter what someone tells you about what you can expect in the future, that might hold true for you, but to the same individual or to another brother or sister in the same family, that might not hold true. So I always just tell the students, like, just go with what you think is best and go with like your heart, because no matter what I can tell you in your head, and you can play all these games to try and figure out what you think is best for you. But all I can do is tell you like my story. And at the time when I decided, it was, hey, the bombers were deploying every year and a half, and they were gone for 6 months. And at least the Strike Eagles at the time, they were deploying every year and a half or so, but they were deploying for 4 months at the time. And the mission set itself seemed a little bit different as well. So for me, I think, again, as naive as it was, my decision making was purely, again, I wanted to fly fast and shoot missiles and be able to see outside. And I think, would I have had a great career and loved my job if I went to the bomber route? Yes, I don't doubt that for a second. But just make the decisions, and you talk to every Air Force officer who have flown, and they will have similar stories. And no one will tell you, "Oh, my job was terrible," because it's the life experience that we gain from the military that's just you can't pay for, And so take that experience and run with it. And I don't think you could make a bad choice.
When I joined, I was going to be an engineer because I thought you had to be an engineer to be a pilot. What I failed to do is really find mentors that had walked the path before me to say, "Oh no, this is really what you need to do X, Y, and Z in order to be a pilot." And so That's the biggest thing. I think when it comes down to it is seeking out mentors and seeking out people that have walked the path and ask those questions. So you're not making those decisions in the blind. Because I know I made a lot of decisions in the blind that maybe would turn out different. I'm happy the way everything turned out. But again, it comes down to it is you're not the first person to do this. You won't be the last person to do it. And there's a lot of information out there. And this is one format, right, of bringing people together to hopefully answer some of those questions.
Yeah, for sure.
So as we kind of wrap up here, looking back, if you found 15-year-old spins on the street, it could even be 14-year-old spins for that matter. Is there any advice you would give him, or anything you would say to maybe vector him a different direction or do something differently?
Yeah, I think, for me, there was maybe one big decision I could have made in my life when I was in college to potentially have gone a different route. But as I look back on myself now from, what I've gotten to accomplish and experience, I wouldn't change it for sure. But the 15-year-old, I would tell, Jay Park at the time, man, you just got to understand that everything happens for a reason, and that you will make some, bad choices and you will make some good choices, but not to put your head down on potentially some of the bad choices that you make in life, because again, you can overcome everything. You've been given the tools. There are people that have loved you, that will continue to support you, and you just got to set your mind on something, and then all things will come about. And then the only other thing that I would just tell spins would just be learn to read and learn to write, and and love it. And the education never stops. I just had this idea that when I graduate, it'll be over, and it just, again, never stops. And so I wish I would have never kind of set a plateau for when my education stops. And so I think that's a big thing for kids to understand. You will never stop learning. You will never stop experiencing life. And there's always room for growth. And so learn that early.
Yeah, no doubt. And to all the kids who speak English already and are listening to this, you already have an advantage over spins at the same time.
Yeah.
I had it easy. So that's the thing, is there's no excuse to go out there and not crush it.
Right. Amen to that.
Awesome. Spins. Well, thanks for joining me on the podcast today. Really enjoyed hearing your story. I know people are going to enjoy it as well. So thanks again.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me on. And again, go Air Force.
Thanks for listening in to the Pathway to Wings podcast. We'll be back in 2 weeks with another episode.